Posted by you/Thrower_Worth Emil. My 50F son, David, 31M, has been married to my daughter-in-law, Beatrice, 24F, since September 2020. Due to the pandemic, I never really got to know her because they only dated for about a year before getting married, and I didn't know about her until they had been dating for about 6 months. I love my son very much, but I feel like our relationship has been rocky since he got married. He has a daughter from a previous relationship who is 10, and since they got together, I haven't had the same relationship with her. I know this is partially because he moved out of my house, very suddenly, without really saying anything, I might add, and I no longer have her on his weekends. I try to get them to bring her to visit when they have her, but I usually only see her once a month or so. Lately, it has felt like she's been more distant when she visits. I think this is because Beatrice says negative things about me around her, and I find that unfair. They just had a baby at the end of January. She was induced due to preeclampsia and was in labor for 3 days before having a C-section. I had been in an accident a few weeks prior and didn't have a vehicle, and my son refused to pick me up to be there for the labor or to see the baby in the hospital. However, her parents got to see the baby and were in the parking lot the entire time. I called him a few times while she was in labor, but on the second day after her water broke, I called, and I heard her snap at him to get off the phone. After that, he refused to accept any calls. I just wanted to know that the 3 of them were okay. She was in the hospital for 2 days after the C-section, and they didn't stop to visit me on their way home after the birth because she was hurting, even though she had pain meds she could have taken, and she didn't feel right, according to my son. This is when I became concerned that she might have postpartum depression. My daughter ended up picking up her prescriptions and some groceries for them and got to see the baby that night. She and Beatrice apparently have a pretty good relationship. I was supposed to visit a couple of days after they got home, but Beatrice insisted something was wrong and went back to the doctor, who apparently sent her to the hospital. My son told me they diagnosed her with postpartum preeclampsia, but I was pretty sure that condition only occurred during pregnancy and went away after birth, so I thought he was confused. The day after they admitted her again, which was 5 days after the baby was born, everyone had met the baby except me, and it was also my birthday. I called Beatrice around 8 that morning to see what was really going on, but she didn't answer. A while later, my son called to wish me a happy birthday and asked why I had called Beatrice. I admit I snapped at him, saying she should be returning my call because I had called her. I hung up on him, and maybe 5 minutes later, she called me. I told her she should have called me, as I wanted to hear her voice and get the details directly from her, since my son tends to get confused. I then asked her if this was a mental or physical issue. She went silent for a moment before saying it was physical. I asked if she was sure, and she got a bit snippy, saying that they had padding on her bed because she was a seizure risk, and that she couldn't be alone with her newborn, so she was pretty sure. I didn't comment on her tone because I understood she was likely stressed. She was released the next day, and they visited me while I was at my daughter's house watching her 2 kids, so I could finally see the baby. I offered Beatrice some pillows to sit on, as my son had mentioned that she had basically given birth both ways. Even though I knew this wasn't true, I wondered if she had some soreness that made him think that. However, she refused my hospitality, saying she was fine and actually felt pretty good. 2 weeks later, my son picked me up and brought me to their home for a visit. I stayed for a few hours, but Beatrice didn't really make any effort to talk to me. She was quiet and just sat on the couch. When my son took me home, I asked why she had been so unwelcoming, and he said it was because I had been rude while she was in the hospital. He said Beatrice shouldn't have had to call me, and I shouldn't have asked if it was a mental or physical problem since he had already told me it was physical. He also mentioned that I shouldn't have posted anything on Facebook about the baby's birth before Beatrice did, and that I was rude when he called and asked me to take it down. Since she doesn't post on social media very often, I didn't think it would be a big deal. He hasn't picked me up to see the baby because he says he needs to be there to help with the baby, and they won't bring the baby to me because he says the baby isn't allowed in my house. I told my son I'm planning to quit my job to babysit for them, but I haven't even gotten her return to work date, and she hasn't once thanked me for offering to do it. Overall, I feel like she's holding on to some very petty things and is using them to keep me from my son and granddaughters. I want a relationship with her, but I am missing critical bonding time with the baby, and I'm going to struggle to forgive her for that, especially over petty nonsense she won't even bring up to discuss with me. I'm really wanting to send a text and lay all my feelings out to her and just hash it out, but I understand there are probably cultural differences at play in all of this too, so I could use some advice on what to say. Update 3 weeks later. Well, I apologized to my daughter-in-law for all the things my son listed. Since I had received feedback that it was my son's job to handle his family, I told him my apologies to pass along, and then I waited. However, I got no response from Beatrice, no thank you, no attempt to bury the hatchet, nothing. So, last Friday, I made an appointment with an attorney to discuss grandparents' rights and had that appointment on Tuesday. The lawyer told me I had a good chance with my older granddaughter but would likely get nowhere with the baby. I filled out some paperwork to get the process started, but Tuesday night, I started questioning if I was doing the right thing. I called one of my friends to discuss it and was seriously considering not moving forward after talking to her. Then yesterday, I received this message from Beatrice. My name, this is Beatrice. I just wanted to let you know that a friend's name told us you're intending to go for grandparents' rights and also shared everything you've said about me. Let me first say that I have not once kept either of the girls from you, and I certainly haven't kept Son's name from you. He is a grown man, and if he wanted to talk to you, he was free too. You haven't asked to come over and visit since Son's name picked you up. You can't expect us to read your mind or drop everything and come pick you up. We have a new baby, and we have our own lives. I also haven't said a word to you about what happened during delivery/postpartum because I have no energy to argue with you. Son's name said you apologized, and I told him I appreciated it, even though it was not a real apology. You apologized for what you did to hurt my feelings, not that my feelings were hurt. I don't have time for your drama. For the record, what you said was absolutely disgusting. I almost died. It had nothing to do with my mental health. Since you decided to go for grandparents' rights, we will have no direct contact with you. All contact will need to go through our lawyer. You've been removed from my Facebook. You are not permitted to post any pictures you've been sent of my child on social media, and older granddaughter's mom's name feels the same way regarding older granddaughter's name. We intend to have something written up by our lawyer and sent to you by the end of the week regarding this and ceasing contact with us. I assume we will be served with your visitation paperwork this week as well. You will get no pictures or phone calls going forward. In fact, you will be blocked. I also hope you realize you will absolutely lose this case. Your house is not suitable to live in, and you would have to be able to pass a substance test. When you lose, we will not resume contact with you. You lost your chance at being part of our kids' lives by deciding to go to the most nuclear option instead of just communicating with us. I tried to respond to her and tell her that I didn't want to go through with it anymore and that I had reacted out of anger, but she wouldn't answer my texts or calls, so I assume I really am blocked. I called my son to tell him about the text she sent, and he said he knew about it and that it was a lot nicer than what he wanted to send me. So, that's where I'm at right now. I'm going to show my lawyer the text so it can demonstrate how unwilling she is to forgive and work with me, and hopefully, this will resolve quickly so I can at least get visitation rights with my oldest granddaughter. Edit. I don't appreciate the nasty messages or the barrage of nasty comments I've received. I admit I made a mistake, but now this is my only option. It's clear that most of the responses on Reddit are from young people, not from my generation, as I've gotten different responses in other online support groups from people my age, many of whom are grandparents and from my own culture. Second update 2.5 months later. I really don't think I'm wrong, but I just need reassurance that I'm doing the right thing. I have a son David who is married to Beatrice. They have a daughter who is 4 months old, and my son has a daughter from a previous relationship who is 10. Beatrice and I had a falling out after their baby was born, and my son and granddaughters got caught in the crossfire. The falling out happened in March, and I know I did and said things I'm not proud of, and although she hasn't apologized, I'm sure she feels the same way. It would take too long to go over the entire history, but at the most extreme point, I consulted a lawyer for grandparent rights. During this time, my son had no contact with me, but when I dropped the grandparents' rights case, I asked for things to go back to normal. My son expressed that he wanted things to return to normal, but that a lot of damage had been done, and he wasn't sure if we could truly go back to how things were before. For Mother's Day, my daughter decided to take me out to dinner, and she begged David to come and bring the baby. The oldest was with her mom. David eventually agreed on the condition that it wasn't on Mother's Day. He, the baby, and Beatrice came. Beatrice was quiet for most of the dinner, but she did talk to my daughter a few times. I guess they have a pretty good relationship. Beatrice held the baby the entire time and wouldn't let me hold her or take pictures. Part of our falling out was over pictures and Facebook, so I found this to be petty. Overall, I would have called dinner a success. At the end, I hugged my son and told him I was proud of him for putting his foot down and coming to dinner with his daughter, and that I hoped he could continue to do that. Looking back, I know I shouldn't have said anything. My son called me later that night and told me that he couldn't continue to have a relationship with me. He said that Beatrice is their child's mother, and he wouldn't ever bring the baby anywhere without her blessing. I was drunk when he called because I've had a hard time coping, and I admit I lost it a little during the phone call. I told him it was despicable that he couldn't stand up to his wife, and that he should have come to see me on Mother's Day because I am his mother. He ended up hanging up on me. I called the next day and profusely apologized to him. I know it was wrong of me to have said what I did, and I told him I want a relationship with him. He told me he couldn't do this with me anymore. I have been heartbroken ever since, but I understand, I guess. I called him last night and told him that I wouldn't be contacting him or his wife anymore, and that I respected that we wouldn't have a relationship. I also let him know I would be taking him off as my power of attorney and out of my will, so he never had to be bothered with anything from me again. I don't have much anyway. He got mad at me and called me a sorry excuse for a mother, and now my daughter is saying I'm manipulative. I really don't understand how I was wrong in giving him what he wants. Third update 2 days later. After someone posted a link to what I believe are my daughter-in-law's Reddit posts, and I read some of the verbal attacks I received, I did some more reflection. I feel like her perspective of events really helped shift my view. I do want to point out that several people told me I was not wrong and that this younger generation has a poor view of family values. I truly believe I was judged so harshly because there are so few parents and grandparents on Reddit. I went to my son and daughter-in-law's house, but it was mostly empty. I was afraid of this after reading her post and some of the comments. I found the listing, and it's been posted for almost a week and is currently pending, but I can't find where they moved to, and all the photos show the house mostly empty. I suspect they bought a new house under an LLC, so I'm currently trying to figure out how to find out the name of the LLC and then find the house. I talked to one of their neighbors, and they said they moved most of their stuff out around the beginning of May, so my son kept this from me for quite a while, and didn't even bother to mention it at dinner. I had a meeting with my therapist to help me through this, but I'm still a wreck. My son has just disappeared. I know everyone here is looking at my small 3,000 character limited posts and my daughter-in-law's long gripes about me, but my son wouldn't do this on his own. His wife is absolutely manipulative, but it doesn't change the fact that I handled this all wrong and drove him further away. If I had just sought out a relationship with my son and granddaughters without involving Beatrice, I don't think I would be in this situation. I should have just played nice. One commenter put it perfectly when they asked me, "Do you want to be right, or do you want to have a relationship with your son and granddaughter?" And I chose wrong. My therapist told me to give myself some healing time before pursuing anything, but for now, my plan is to save some money and hire a private investigator to find my son. Then I'll work to rebuild our relationship and his trust so we can eventually get him out from under her influence. Again, I recognize I was wrong in some of this. I know I was overly demanding and critical, and I accept that I made mistakes. But I didn't deserve this. People who use kids and grandkids as pawns are evil. Edit. Screw everyone here. I am far from being a devil. I am not evil. The person who is evil is the one who took my family completely away from me. My daughter-in-law has completely manipulated my son. I'll admit I was far from perfect, but I don't deserve what you people are saying about me. I hope one day you feel what it's like to lose your child and grandchild to a manipulative person who just wants to cut their family off. Fourth update 1 year 5 months later. Can I sue to get my son's ashes? My son passed away earlier this year. We had a really rocky relationship over the last year or so, mainly caused by his wife. They separated after he had a work-related accident that caused a traumatic brain injury, which had lasting effects on his personality. She basically decided she couldn't handle it and told him to leave. They were separated when he passed away, but I don't know if divorce had been officially filed. They supposedly had 2 children together, and he has an older daughter from a previous relationship. When I received the news of his death, I was able to see him before he was cremated. I requested some of his ashes from the funeral home, but my wishes were not honored, and I didn't want him cremated either, but that wish wasn't honored either. I've reached out to her about a number of things, including his ashes and some of his belongings, but she is not willing to part with any of it, even though they were separated. She claims the ashes and belongings should go to his supposed children, along with all his life insurance policies and his work settlement. I say supposed children because I have reason to believe her children are not his. Can I sue for his ashes and belongings? Is there a way to have a paternity test done so that his belongings and ashes can go to his sister and me if we are his only living relatives? I don't understand why she would get everything if they were separated and she abandoned him. I feel like his actual living relatives should be entitled to everything. Commenter. If the breakdown was his wife's fault, why didn't he reach out once they were separated? How do you know they were separated, and how long was it? Ops response. He did reach out before they were separated, after his injury. His injury finally gave him the strength to stand up to her. I know they won't replace my son, but I would still like to have some things to remember him by. I won't be able to have a relationship with her or the kids, if they are even his, because she destroyed our relationship after giving birth to her oldest, and did the same to me, the mother of his other daughters. Commenter. The way you talk about your supposed grandchildren really doesn't sit right with me. It makes me think that you were to blame for the falling out, not her. If the supposed children were good enough for your son, that should be enough for you to treat them as such, regardless of how you feel. Also, he left children behind. That money will help them. I want to feel sorry for you because you've lost your son, and I can't even begin to fathom that. But you just give off mean girl energy. Ops response. I can't treat them anyway because their mother won't let me be around them, and has even convinced the oldest child's mother as well. She has taken everything, including the last moments with him, and stole 1.5 years of his life from me. She abandoned him. Commenter. By supposed kids, you mean your grandchildren? This post screams that you're only concerned about the money. Ops response. I don't just want the money, I just don't think it should go to her. I would like some of his belongings because I want something to remember him by. He built things that I would like to have, and there are items he got from my mother that I would like back. I also have reason to believe the kids aren't his. His wife made us estranged, and I blame her for his death. I don't think it's fair that she gets everything after leaving him because of his disability, including the settlement money from his job once it's finalized. He died alone in a hotel because she wouldn't take care of him and was punishing him for talking to me after his injury made him stand up to her.